Okay, looks like we're live. Hey, Fernando. Okay, so as always, we will wait a short moment before we really start to give everyone the chance to join. And yeah, then we'll take a closer look at the Persistence Hub. And I'm answering all of your questions related to either the Persistence Hub or also some Java persistence related stuff that you might be interested in. So hoping all of you are doing fine. Currently checking that, yeah, the stream is live on YouTube. That's great. And on LinkedIn as well. So yeah, let's dive in. So you might have seen on torbenjansen.com that I'm currently running a Black Friday sale. And let's be totally open about this. That's, of course, also the reason why I'm running this stream and why I'm showing you a little bit behind the scenes of the Persistence Hub. If you want to get into the Persistence Hub and become a member, you can see the link at the bottom of the screen. And yeah, grab a discount on the annual membership if you want. Okay, but let's take a look at the Persistence Hub and see what you actually get when you become a member. So here is the dashboard of the Persistence Hub. It shows you the latest content that we added. Last Monday, for example, we had a new expert session with Darius Spilker. You might know him as a prolific author and conference speaker about Spring Security, and that was also the topic he talked about when he joined us. We have several things upcoming. On every first Monday of the month, I'm posting a new coding problem. We will take a quick look at the current coding problem in a minute. Short version there is I'm showing you my preferred solution to a common task or problem. Every second Monday of the month is a new Java persistence news episode where we take a look at the releases that were published for Hibernate, Spring Data JPA, Jakarta Data, Jakarta Persistence, and so on over the last 4 weeks. And then on the third Monday of the month, we have an expert session, usually with a guest speaker. Sometimes I host these sessions myself. So yeah, what else do you find there? Well, there are the learning paths, which is something I added this year. So for example, if you say you want to learn about Spring Data JPA, then these are the courses and expert sessions that are best suited for you to, for example, start as a beginner and learn about JPA basics, entity mappings and that stuff, and then go to Spring Data JPA and yeah, watch several expert sessions and so on. These learning paths all reference stuff from the courses, of course. Here at the top, there's the What's New in course, and that is something that I extract from the Java Persistence News to give you an overview of which features were added in the different releases. And there was, for example, in Hibernate 6.4, support for soft deletes, which I explain here in a short video that I got from the Java Persistence News. And then you can, of course, take a look at the source code here in the GitHub repository. All code examples are stored on GitHub in a protected organization to which you get access when you join. And can also use the GitHub code space to actually run that. I will show you that in a second. When we take a look at a different course, which is the Hibernate Envers course, that's my latest course. We will complete it this month. And well, after you're done, you can download a certificate that you can add to your CV or wherever you need it. Here, links to get the code on GitHub or start the code space, and of course, all the lectures in this case about Hibernate envers, each of them consisting of a video, In this case, a 3-minute 40 video explaining how to execute attributes from your envers audit log. A written version below. So my general recommendation here is, if you're new to the topic, sit back, watch the video, follow along in the code. And if you already did that and just look for something that you need right now in your current project, then yeah, search through the text. That's at least how I use these kinds of materials. And for every lecture, there's of course a GitHub repository, or for the entire course, and a GitHub code space. And the GitHub code space is quite nice. You can see it here. It's something that's part of your free GitHub account. There you get, I think, 20 or 30 hours of GitHub code spaces on the bigger machine. And that's basically a virtual development environment that runs in the cloud and that you can access via your browser. Unfortunately, not via IntelliJ. There are plugins for that, but it's not running in the browser. If you want to run it in the browser, then you have to use VS Code, but it's not that bad. So what do you get here? You get a real IDE that you can use to browse through your code. Let's say open up this chess player and look at the mapping annotations or modify them if you want. Or even go here into the test case and simply run the test case. See, it executes the code. See the log messages that Hibernate envers prints out. And if you use that with the picture-in-picture mode, then you can even have me talking in the lower right corner while you are going through the code samples yourself and follow along with the stuff that I'm showing you, which is, I think, quite nice. Okay, what else do you get? Well, you also get the expert sessions we just talked about with popular guest speakers. As I said, Laurus Bilker was part of the Persistence Hub expert sessions this month. Not too long ago, Lukas Eder joined us to talk about Juke, Ronald de Heuser for Job Runner, and many others. And you can, of course, access all these expert sessions in the archives. And there's a new one added every month. And then we have a coding problem. Here I'm showing you a typical solution to, or my preferred solution to a typical thing that you might find in your project, again, as a video description and with projects as examples on how to do it and how to not do it. And usually the how to not do it branch is something that I see quite often in projects. And then we have the Java persistence news, which is something that you should definitely not miss when you join the Persistence Hub, because here I'm explaining the latest features. So we are taking a look at the latest release notes, go through the announcement that we got there, and then I showcase different features. Like, for example, in August, we had a look at Hibernate 6. What was it? I think it was 6.4. Or in that case, it was a 7.0 beta 1 release, where we had a look at the new enumerated value feature added by Hibernate 7, where you can now use an enum, give it a property annotated with enumerated value. See up here, these enum definitions define the different type values, and then Hibernate stores that value inside your database, which is quite a nice feature. It gives you much more flexibility than you usually have with the standard enum mapping that either stores the string or the ordinal value, while the ordinal value is the position here in the enum definition. Yeah, quite technical representation of the enum value creates lots of issues when refactoring. I prefer custom value over that, of course. Okay. Yeah, that's basically it. As I said, a bunch of courses. You can see them here. Right now we are finishing up the Hibernate envers course. The next topic I'll be working on will most likely be Jakarta data, because, well, it's a new specification and it's something that I think is really interesting and that people should be aware of, but I'm also always open to suggestions from Persistence Hub members on what topics are relevant for you right now that we should talk about in more detail. Okay, well, enough talking from my side. Do you guys have any questions? Or shall we just take a look at maybe the examples from the Java Persistence News episode that I just shared? If you have any questions, feel free to post them in the chat. And I'm more than happy to answer them. Doesn't have to be related to the Persistence Hub, can also be about anything Java persistence related, like problems with your current persistence layer, questions you wanted to ask in general, whatever's on your mind. Okay, while I'm waiting for the for any questions in the chat, let me quickly go back to the example that we had just here, and maybe talk a minute or two about that, and then we take a look at the other things that we discussed in the Java Persistence News back in August. As I said, it's something that we do every month. So we had an enum called player type, and that has a field type. You can call this field however you want. And then you can just define them here, and by annotating it with enumerated value, you make sure that they entered there. It's just a simple marker interface. And so Paul asked in the chat, do you have details on performance costs or benefits of different approaches? Paul, are you talking about the enum mapping approach? So from a pure performance point of view, I didn't measure it for Hibernate 7 beta 1 because, well, it's too early. It's a beta version. But in general, from a performance point of view, the mapping of an enum value doesn't really make a difference. It's more from a maintainability point of view. So if we remove this and just rerun the test case, then we will see that Hibernate stores the value club player as a string in the database. And that means this string representation is stored there. As soon as you change it also in your database, and that means you have to refactor all your existing you have to migrate all of your existing database records to the new version, which, to be honest, can be quite annoying. The second issue is that this here is a relatively long representation. Depending on the name of your enum, the string representation can get quite noisy. So you might not want to use that. So you could, of course, go here and add enumerated annotation with enum type. Let me check. Why didn't it pick up that enum type? So with ordinal, it should actually use the position information. That means tab player is mapped to 0, pro player is mapped to 1, and the next value that you add here is mapped to 2. And that means as soon as you change the order, add something in the middle, remove something that's not the last element, your ordinal of all other elements changes, which is very annoying when you do that on an application that's already deployed in production, because technically your application will still work, just all the enum values that you get back from the database will be wrong, because now your mapping is different to when you wrote that record, and that means you have to migrate everything to tell your database that everything that's currently, I don't know, ordinal value 2 is now value 3, because 2 now has a new meaning. And yeah, that just opens up a huge can of worms, and quite often causes some trouble in production. So in the past, most teams then went ahead and implemented an attribute converter, which is a simple Java interface you have to implement that defines two methods, one to map the Java value to the database representation and one for the other direction. And yeah, that solved the refactoring issue, because then you had the mapping under control, but it's some extra code that you have to write. And this approach here is much more elegant as I think. So yeah, Paul, I hope that that answers your questions. If not, then just please post them again in the chat. So Marwan has another question. Thanks, Tom. I have a question about Hibernate performance. We recently upgraded to Hibernate 6 from Hibernate 5. The application is used with two databases, MySQL and SQL Server. We noticed that the SQL Server performance degraded a lot, while the MySQL performance did not suffer such degradation. Any ideas about why that is, and where to start to look for possible solutions? Now, that's an interesting question. So yeah, I know that some projects had trouble with performance issues when migrating from Hibernate 5 to 6, but then it was for all databases they used. And I know that others had problems when migrating from one database system to another, because then the type mapping in some cases changed and optimizations and stuff like that. So yeah, these are common situations. That the performance for MySQL stayed the same and SQL Server performance degraded, that's strange. I mean, what we got with Hibernate 6 was we got many changes on the database dialect implementations used by Hibernate. So you can see that Hibernate uses a dialect somewhere during the, can we see it here? Usually you can see it somewhere in the startup log output that Hibernate uses a specific dialect. Just don't see it right here. And that, yeah, usually tells you the dialect it's using. And the dialect is used to adapt the query statements and many other things to the database-specific SQL dialect. Because the issue with the SQL standard is that, yeah, there is a standard, but every database implements it slightly differently, which is really annoying if you have to implement your own SQL statements. Hibernate takes care of that with different dialects, one for each database. So maybe that thing is causing the issue in your case. And well, what you can do is you can go to your persistence.xml file, or to your application properties file if you're using Hibernate as the JPA implementation with Spring Data JPA, and set the generate statistics property to true. You then get let's rerun the test case. For some reason, my key bindings don't work with the streaming setup and the web IDE. So yeah, then you get this block here, which basically tells you what kind of operations Hibernate executed. Here the number of executed JDBC statements and how long it took, the time spent on flush operation. A flush operation is something that Hibernate does before executing a query or committing the transaction. And during that flush, Hibernate checks all managed entities, so all entities you fetch from the database or persisted or merged during your use case, and checks if they were modified. If yes, then Hibernate writes a statement to the database. Yeah, so you can see how much time was spent on that. Partial flushes are basically the same, but in an optimized form that Hibernate might use before executing a query. The flush checks everything, and that has to be done before committing the transaction. Before executing a query, a partial flush might be good enough. So the situation there is you have potentially modified entities in local memory, and you're now sending a query to the database. If you want to get the right result, you have to tell your database all relevant information. And that's what Hibernate is checking in a partial flush. Hibernate determines the so-called query space, for example, for some query. So Hibernate looks at the query statement and figures out, okay, that query uses the, let's say, the chess player table. And that means if it only uses the chess player table, then only changes on chess player entities might affect the result of the query, while chess tournaments, for example, could be modified in local memory, but will not change that query result because you're not accessing the table to which that entity gets mapped. So during the partial flush, Hibernate just checks the entities that might affect the query result. And if any of these are modified, then Hibernate flushes all changes to the database. And yeah, the time spent on that is shown in partial flush. The pre-partial flushes is a change or a new statistic we see since I think it was introduced in Hibernate 6.5 or could be 6.6. And that is just that Hibernate's metrics now also measure the time that Hibernate spends before actually performing a partial flush. And during that time, it determines which entities are relevant for that query. Are there any lifecycle operations that have to be cascaded to other entities and stuff like that? So yeah, a lot of preparatory work that has to be done before Hibernate can actually perform the flush with checking the changes and writing it to the database. And that is written here. So yeah, all of this and how to handle all the different situations is, for example, something that we discuss in great detail in the Hibernate Performance Tuning course that you can find in the Persistence Hub. But yeah, to be honest, right now, without having any more information, Marwan, I have no idea why the performance for SQL Server might have degraded while the performance for MySQL stayed the same. Oh, wait a second, maybe I have an idea. So what we got with Hibernate 6 was that Hibernate in the past had the query generation distributed all over the code base, which is a typical example of an application or library that has grown over time, right? And well, the Hibernate project has grown for more than 20 years, I think. I started using it in probably 2001, so 20-something years. And yeah, the issue that they had was there were several places in the code base that got a request from our code and then generated an abstract syntax tree and a query statement. And yeah, they'll basically duplicate code that, as it is always, just looks slightly different, right? And with Hibernate 6, they unified all of that. They introduced a semantic query model on which the existing APIs just work, and then we have this semantic model, and this semantic model gets transformed into an abstract syntax tree, which is then used to generate the SQL statement. That, plus all the optimizations that the Hibernate team added as part of Hibernate 6, had the effect that the SQL statements now look very different to the ones that we generated with Hibernate 5. So yeah, even though you didn't change anything in your code, the generated SQL statement that's now sent to the database might look very different than it looked before. And that could, of course, result in changes on how the database handles that query statement. For example, if it uses an index or not. And yeah, that would be something that you see here. So if you run your application with Hibernate 5, and collect these statistics and then run the same thing with Hibernate 6, then you most likely see a difference here. And if it's related to the query generation and that your query now handles the statements differently, then you should see that here in the time spent on executing JDBC statements. There were also several other changes in Hibernate 6 that could cause problems or changes in the performance, but most of them should honestly affect both database systems. So yeah, this would be probably my best guess, that now your query statement looks different, or at least one of them, and that the database handles that differently. Okay, then there's a question from Fernando. Tom, do you use and modify the default values of Hikari, CP, and Spring Boot applications? Well, yeah, it depends on the application. It definitely happens. In many cases, it's more that we modify the size of the pool that we add. For example, a statement to validate that the query that the connection is still alive, and stuff like that. But yeah, Fernando, are you looking for anything specific here? So we have a little bit of delay here, so don't wonder that I'm taking a while to wait for Fernando's answer. Unfortunately, that's how most of these streaming platforms work. So yeah, while I'm waiting for Fernando, timeouts. Yeah, timeouts are difficult. Timeouts are often more difficult than they seem. In many cases, I start with default values and then we monitor the production system, or what's even better, have a test instance that is very similar to production and in which we run a load test and then just see how that works. But yeah, I don't have any specific recommendations there, Fernanda. Sorry. Okay, any further questions, anyone? While I'm waiting for more questions, I'll quickly go back here. You can see the link to the Persistence Hub page here on the bottom of the screen on the overlay. It's torbenjansen.com/join Persistence Hub. Here you have quite a long explanation on what you actually get and what was the motivation behind that and the whole idea. You can see you can join on a monthly membership or right now at an annual membership, which gives you about 3 months for free. And yeah, you can also take a look at the team subscriptions if you think you can convince your manager to sign up your entire team, which is, I would say, actually worth it, because you get a huge set of courses here included in the Persistence Hub. the Hibernate stuff alone, JPA for beginners, Hibernate performance tuning, and advanced Hibernate is something that in an on-site workshop I teach for more than a week. So yeah, lots of details in there. And if you're looking for some training opportunity for your team and coworkers, then that's of course also an option. Okay. Any further questions? Well, it looks like there are none. If you have a question, this is your final chance to post them. Otherwise, I will end the stream in a second. Yeah, thanks everyone for joining. I hope I was able to show you something new with this. Here it is with this. No, it's the wrong IDE. This one. With this that is enumerated value annotation introduced in Hibernate 7. And yeah, if there are no... Marvin asked, what are plans for the Persistence Hub for 2025? Good question, Marvin. Well, first of all, we will continue with the regular programming, let's call it like that, with the coding problem at the published on the first Monday of every month, where I show you a solution to a common task or problem that shows up in many projects in my experience. And yeah, these coding problems get replaced every month. If you're a member in January next year, then you can get all the coding problems of 2024 as well. Then we do the Java persistence news on the second Monday, where we talk about the latest releases. Usually look at Spring Data JPA, Hibernate, Jakarta Persistence, Jakarta Data. Every now and then I also take a look at Spring Data JDBC as well. And then we have a guest speaker on the third Monday of each month for an expert session. In addition to that, I'm of course working on a few courses. So right now my plan is to extend the expert session that I did last month about Jakarta Data to a fully featured course. I think now is about the time where it makes sense to start doing that, because the Hibernate implementation seems to be stable enough to actually build a course based on that. And then things I'm looking into Spring AI and Spring Data JDBC. Spring Data JDBC, the chances are very high that I'm doing a course on that. Right now we just have 2 expert sessions with Jens Schauder, the main developer working on the Spring team on Spring Data JDBC. But I would like to add a full course for that. And yeah, I'm very interested in this Spring AI project and the integration of AI into our Spring applications. And yeah, depending on the interest in the Persistence Hub, I will most likely add a course about that as well. Maybe a question for the chat here. Are you using AI in your, or are you offering AI features in your applications? Is that something you're interested in? Or is that currently not a topic in your specific niche? Yeah, that is about the rhythm in which you can expect changes in the Persistence Hub. 3 regular monthly editions on the different Mondays. Then I'm adding some course lectures every month, depending on how big and new the topic is. It could be more or less. And yeah, then I'm of course updating the old courses. So Hibernate 7 will most likely be out sometime next year, I guess. Not sure if we will get it this year, because right now we remember correctly, we have beta 2 out right now. Not sure if the Hibernate team wants to release the final version in the if the Hibernate team will release it in December this year, or if they will move it to next year, we will see. But as soon as it's out, I will be working on updating the courses. That is a huge benefit of the having the courses on GitHub. Right now, I'm maintaining Hibernate 5 and Hibernate 6 versions of the code examples, and we will add a Hibernate 7 example to that. And then we'll see how much of a change that is to the actual lecture content. But I will then, of course, work on that as well. Yeah, and Marvin is not offering any AI in the app right now, but using it as a coding assistant. Yeah, that's also something that's really interesting and that we got over the last several months, or is it already a year? Not sure. And well, I'm still not 100% convinced about the responses and support we get right now. As soon as it gets a little bit interesting, but we're definitely moving in the right direction. But it also shows that understanding how frameworks work gets more and more important, because in the past, if you didn't know how to do something, you went on Stack Overflow or somewhere else and copied code from there and used it in your application. But there you had the discussion below that, and probably people telling the author of that response that the solution worked or caused other problems or not. The problem with the AI assistant while coding is you don't have any of that. You just get a recommendation. And in my experience, quite often these recommendations are really good, but there are also several that will cause huge issues in production. And well, without any additional feedback, if you're not familiar with that feature or programming language, you have no clue what you're currently looking at, and that's quite risky. Yeah, and that's why I think that understanding your frameworks is even more important now than it was several months ago. Because in the past, if you didn't know a feature, you were not able to use it. Now you can simply add it with 2 clicks to your code, and you have no clue what will happen in production, which most likely is even worse than not being able to implement that. Yeah, okay. Well, looks like there are not any additional questions. So thanks everyone for joining. It was great to have a few people here and asking questions. I hope that I was able to help you with my answers. If you think that I did a good job explaining stuff, then you can find much more of that inside the Persistence Hub. And for about 2.5 days from now, so until midnight on Friday, you can join the Persistence Hub as part of my Black Friday offer, and I hope to see you there. And well, if not, we will definitely see each other here again on YouTube or on my mailing list. So yeah, thanks for joining and have a great rest of your day. Bye.